Partial funding for this program has been provided by WTIU members and by Green & Schultz Trial Lawyers, protecting the rights of victims of injury and loss. Attorneys Betsy Green and Fred Schultz serving clients throughout Indiana. Available at 336-4357 or at greenschultz.com. The IU College of Arts and Sciences, offering 70 degrees in academic disciplines and instruction in over 70 foreign languages. Celebrating 125,000 alumni, the IU College of Arts and Sciences, educating scholars for tomorrow's leadership roles.
She was too humble to talk about herself. Elinor Ostrom didn't like recognition. She loved research, and she dedicated her life to it. Good evening, I'm Sarah Whitmire. Thanks for joining us for a special presentation from the WFIU-WTIU news team, Elinor Ostrom, Celebration of a Nobel Life. After a brief battle with pancreatic cancer, Elinor Ostrom died this week at the age of 78. She's being remembered as one of the most important faculty members to ever work at Indiana University. Ostrom's career spanned 50 years, during which time she authored hundreds of articles and dozens of books, including her best-known work, Governing the Commons, the Evolution of Institutions for Collective Action, which explains effective governance systems for common pool resources. With her husband, Vincent, Elinor Ostrom founded the Workshop in Political Theory and Policy Analysis in 1973. The center became a research hub for scholars around the world and from many disciplines. In 2009, Ostrom became an international celebrity of sorts when she became the first woman to ever win the Nobel Prize in Economics. Her colleagues and students are remembering her not only as a brilliant researcher who was well ahead of her time, but also simply as an amazing human being. Tonight, the WFIU-WTIU news team presents Elinor Ostrom, Celebration of a Nobel Life.
She's truly one of the most unusual and outstanding people I've ever met in my life.
Humble, brilliant, provocative, but warm, and above all, admiring and friendly.
She never let boundaries define the questions. She never let any kind of boundary define the questions, not disciplinary boundaries, not geographical boundaries, no boundaries.
Well, Lynn's commitment to working with students, especially graduate students, is well known. The Nobel Prize is like icing on a cake.
With the exception of Herman Wells, I can't think of anyone else that I would put above her for their impact on Indiana University.
When you think of the Ostroms, they're like the therapy for the biggest illnesses that universities face. People getting buried in their individual disciplines. And who has done better than the Ostroms at bringing people from different parts of a university together to study and work on common problems and come up with solutions? They are the therapy for the problems in America's universities.
The spirit of collaboration for mutual benefit and progress that President Wells described just over 6 decades ago captures the powerful intellectual spirit that Lynn Ostrom has generated during her over 40 years at Indiana University.
If you have lived through the era that I've lived through, getting into graduate school was a challenge, and I won't go into all the details, but you can't have received a PhD in '65 as a woman and not be deeply aware that the advice to me when I applied to graduate school was, well, you've got a professional job, which I had. I was working in business and in public. Why would you try for a PhD? You can't possibly get a job doing anything but teaching in a city college somewhere, and you've got a better job now. And, you know, I loved what I was doing in terms of I'd started a master's and got very excited about what I was doing. So I entered it for love. I didn't enter it to get a job because I was warned I wouldn't get one. But fortunately, Indiana University hired me to teach American government on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. at 7:30 in the morning. After being so turned aside at an early juncture, where it was, you'll never be able to teach in a major university, you just can't get a job, I think getting tenure and being able to have the workshop and the activities, et cetera, that was so satisfying that I didn't worry about some of these other ranking things.
The struggle to win distinction is as intense as in any other field of human activity. But in scholarly competition, success is not won at the expense of others. There is no attempt to take advantage of or push others back. Instead, each success on the part of one inevitably brings new opportunities for creative achievement to all others working on related problems. Ladies and gentlemen, I am honoured and delighted to introduce to you Nobel laureate Elinor Ostrom.
This is a day that started with a big surprise. Your phone rings at 6:30 in the morning and you wonder, well, is that somebody calling with a recording? Is there going to be a voice at the other end?
Each new honour won by a member of the faculty brings increased prestige to all members of the faculty and the student body. And so it is in every institution throughout the land.
And I was very surprised that there was a real human at the other end, and indicating that it was from Stockholm and the committee had made their decision. A great thrill, a very big surprise. What a way to start a Monday morning.
I would see her reasonably regularly, and I got to know her pretty well over the years. And then, of course, that wonderful morning when she was awarded the Nobel Prize for economics, I saw a lot of her after that. I saw her on a very, very regular basis because I was involved in various functions where we honoured her. And I was involved in a variety of different occasions where Lynn would very kindly meet with visitors, and she was just an extraordinary servant of the institution. And of course, Laurie and I were both honoured and lucky enough to accompany her to the Nobel Prize ceremony in Sweden, which was just an unforgettable occasion, and where she handled herself with not only dignity and grace in the most trying and difficult of circumstances. The pace at which they work Nobel Prize winners has to be seen to be believed, but she did it with enormous energy for a woman who I think was then about 76.
What the referee is doing is not saying, oh, you didn't do a very good job at making that shot. The referee is doing, oh, you stepped out of line while you were making that shot. Bad. But the good bad is all on conformance to rules, not on your skill.
We're entering we've already entered a new era, and we recognize that women have the capabilities of doing great scientific work. And yes, I appreciate that this is an honor to be the first woman, but I won't be the last.
People are starting to see her now in a different light, more broadly than they ever did before. And so she can help people think out issues that we never would have thought about before from a collective action point of view. I think it's also just the fact that she's so, I guess I would say, she's friendly, she's engaging, but she's always based in thinking of it from a researcher's point of view. She gets it across in a common language point of view. Anybody can understand it. And that's what makes it really fun for people to talk with her. But there's a background there that is very strong, and you have to dig deep to really understand it.
When one looks through Lynn's personnel file, for example, one is astounded to see over 45 years a nearly continuous record of invitations and solicitations by other institutions to come join faculties at Harvard, at Michigan, and other prestigious institutions. Invitations or requests to consider serving as a dean, for example, for the Maxwell School of Public Administration. But Lynn consistently turned down all of those institutions in order to remain a member of the faculty of the College of Arts and Sciences and to continue her work with her faculty colleagues and students.
You know, in the past, we basically thought it was appropriate to use any time, first come, first served, or some other thing. And yet, there's some people who really come in and grab a lot when we use that. And now, is there a way we can think about changing that? What else could we use?
Many years before the Nobel Prize Committee recognized her work, that here was somebody who was just open to any way you might get to a good answer. You know, that's very rare. There was never anything conventional about her, and she didn't care about convention. She cared about answering questions, and she asked brilliant questions. She didn't care about what you had to study to answer them. She didn't care about the how humble the subjects were. She just was able to take that genius for asking the right question and follow the question wherever it led.
Pursuing the kind of work I have been doing was not very much appreciated across the social sciences. So, but I just got fascinated with what I was doing, and so being a stubborn son of a gun, I just kept going. It meant that I had to learn very early how to work hard and how to be independent. And so maybe part of it is that you just learn that you've got to be independent and that the world isn't going to come to you with all sorts of gifts.
I think one of the distinctive things about Lynn's research is she's simultaneously on the streets of Chicago, the forests of Kenya, and the oceans of the Pacific. She has a sense about working on all facets of daily life, human life, the ecology of the planet. And it's this breadth and depth simultaneously that are stunning.
If you're going to address some of the questions about how do people govern very important resources like our forests, can just a social scientist or just a forester address the question of how to stop deforestation? And I'd say no. But working together, where we really are trying to understand the problems that people whose lives depend on those forests, how they have organized, and how they make a difference. We now have over 200 forests that we've studied around the world. One of the absolutely key, most important variables as to whether or not a forest survives and continues is whether local people monitor each other and its use. We've been very, very fortunate. We've had wonderful graduate students. So one of the treasures that you learn is your graduate students. And my graduate students have been in many ways my family, and some of their kids call me grandma. And so indeed I do look like her grandma.
Lynn and Vincent, her husband, who they co-founded the workshop in 1973, they don't have any children, and we've kind of adopted them into our family. We bring them over for holidays and so we've become very close. Lynn always thought about Vincent whenever she would travel, and she traveled a lot around the world for her many projects. She would always make sure that to get a message to Vincent that would be printed up for him in kind of large print here lately, to let him know what she's doing, because he couldn't hear, so he couldn't really talk by phone. So he would know where she is and what she was doing, and would maintain contact that way.
Lynn is well known for mentoring many, many graduate students. She regards graduate students as future colleagues and collaborators and works tirelessly to promote their careers. I noticed in a memo from a previous dean of the college nearly 25 years ago that he thought it was remarkable that so many of her students graduated with a PhD and several publications to their credit.
She gave the proceeds of a Nobel Prize to Indiana University. Between them, they gave a couple of $1 million, total in excess of $3 million that they've given to the university. I think that figure should be known publicly. I mean, it is really quite remarkable.
Because we live, for better or worse, in a state that is not among the most wealthy states, and by the best projections will not soon become one of the wealthy states. So for Indiana to compete with the universities around the world, many of them in bustling, growing cities, we need to have the philanthropy of the people who care about Indiana University to allow us to compete in the global environment. And these gifts of the Ostroms are an illustration of the philanthropy that allows Indiana University to project itself 100 and 200 years from now.
She was also one of the most intellectually generous people I've ever known. You know, she had students who adored her no matter how far away they were. When I traveled as dean of the law school and I ran into her students, they always asked about her first.
The students, I think, need to be thankful that they had a chance to work with Lynn, because many students have been able to do that over the years, and even though she's not going to be here as they finish up, she's had a chance to have a real influence on them. And her contribution to our program is going to be very, very difficult to, impossible to replace or to have anyone fill her shoes totally.
Vincent and Lynn's research shows that common pool resources are an important and complex aspect of social and economic behavior. Conventional wisdom tends to regard economic and social behavior in terms of two categories, markets and government. Resources are privately owned and subject to competition in a marketplace, or they're regulated by a state. Common pool resources fall into neither of those categories, yet many resources that are important to everyday life of people throughout the world are common pool resources. These are controlled by local self-organizing communities who, for example, manage forests or grazing lands or fish stocks and do so very, very efficiently. Conventional wisdom holds that common pool resources are inefficiently regulated and would be better managed if privatized and subject to the market or controlled by a central government. And their work rigorously shows that not to be the case.
We really demonstrated that complexity is not the same as chaos. And if I guess there's any one message I want to get across, it's not that all complexity is good, but you have to evaluate it as complex related to what, to solve what. And we've had too much of a presumption that just complex is bad.
That's, I hope, her legacy, that we will study policy problems in a more practical and realistic manner rather than purely as academic exercises.
The rules that we use to govern a university, a private firm, a water resource, or any kind of problem need to fit the social ecological area or field that they're supposed to control. Having one kind of rule that will work everywhere is a ridiculous kind of thinking. We did years of looking at police departments. I kid people that I've been in more police cars and more jails than almost any academic you know. And riding in the back seat of a police car on a rainy night with the dog was an experience that I'll never forget. But it gives you an understanding of what a police officer faces and the differences among communities and in the different departments and what they were rewarded for or not. In all of our studies, 15 years worth, we never found a single instance of a large centralized police department outperforming smaller departments serving similar neighborhoods in regard to multiple indicators of servicing the department directly?
Well, universities from medieval times have been dominated by the power of the classic disciplines. And of course, these disciplines are very important. But many of the problems that the planet faces today don't organize themselves around these disciplines. So we need some of our scholars to move across these disciplines, bring people together from different fields and combine their knowledge. That is what Lynn Ostrom and Vincent Ostrom's careers are all about.
She never let the way in which academics traditionally define things define her. And as a result, she did brilliant work, just brilliant work. She's one of the very, 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 very few geniuses I've ever known in my life.
The diagnosis came to her right when we were starting a major project, a major application to the National Science Foundation for a Science and Technology Center. I was very glad that she had that project to work on because it gave her something to focus on. She was always a very private person, didn't like to talk about her health conditions or anything like that, and so this gave her something to really focus on.
Soon after it was diagnosed, I found out, and she told me, and she was optimistic, and she coped with her illness extraordinarily well. I met with her in this very room, I think about 3 months ago with some visiting dignitaries, and she, although by that stage she was starting to suffer the ravages of chemotherapy, I could not have told that she was in any way as ill as she was.
The world lost something with Lynn's passing. I mean, the world lost somebody who knew how to ask the right questions. She knew how to challenge conventional wisdom. And she was a leader in interdisciplinary research long before interdisciplinary research was cool.
Her travel schedule, even in the last few years, as she became ill, was just extraordinary. And she not only was she giving addresses and receiving awards, which was appropriate, but she was involved in research projects all over the world. I think, as you probably know, in Africa and Nepal and South America.
She was doing email from her hospital bed on a regular basis. She really liked to work. She liked to keep in contact with researchers around the world, including her students. She had a dissertation, a copy of a dissertation for a student who's going to be defending in July. And unfortunately, Lynn wasn't able to get all the way through that, but that was sitting, half opened in her hospital bed.
I certainly think she ranks right up there in the pantheon of the true greats of Indiana University. I certainly think that since Wells's death, she probably had become in many ways the largest personality in the university. Lynn was somebody who was not keen on being memorialized early on, because we talked about that, but I certainly think that's a first step by naming the workshop in her and Vincent's honor, and I dare say we'll be considering some other possibilities in the future as well.
Lynn Ostrom was a combination of intellectual humility and searing curiosity. I mean, she was incomparable in her, in both her humility and her brilliance. It's really kind of impossible to imagine the campus without Lynn on it.
Now let's take and learn a little bit from medicine. Before the turn of the 19th century, many of the treatments offered by professional doctors for ailments to bleeding and other ailments that they found were bleeding and purging and all sorts of other things. Silverman, in his history of medicine and his analysis of the slow evolution of when medicine did finally turn out to do more good than harm, has a description of the earlier tradition. When confronted by a sick patient,
Providers gather their purges, bear their lancelets, and charge the enemy, prepared to bleed, purge, and induce vomiting until the disease is conquered. Sorry for the allusions, but that's a quote. You will all be facing interesting and challenging situations in your life, and please approach these as a diagnostician rather than an instant prescriber. Do not charge the environment with lancets to bleed them and concoctions to purge them. We respect that environment, respect that diversity. We can do well when we carefully assess the multiple variables that affect the conditions of social ecological systems. We can do harm if we carry with us simple solutions to complex problems and try to impose them every time.
Partial funding for this program has been provided by WTIU members and by Green & Schultz Trial Lawyers, protecting the rights of victims of injury and loss. Attorneys Betsy Green and Fred Schultz serving clients throughout Indiana. Available at 336-4357 or at greenschultz.com. The IU College of Arts and Sciences, offering 70 degrees in academic disciplines and instruction in over 70 foreign languages. Celebrating 125,000 alumni, the IU College of Arts and Sciences, educating scholars for tomorrow's leadership roles.